In today's video, we're going to tell a very interesting story, the story of the Pope who was married. Taking advantage of the theme, we will also unravel the origins of celibacy. Well, for those who don't know, celibacy is just a nice word to refer to people who chose not to have sex during their lives. Usually this option for sexual abstinence is related to a religious conviction. Wait a little while and we'll deal with this matter in detail right now. Welcome to the Knowledge Society. My name is André Frossard Signes. I have a BA in political science, passionate about general history, philosophy, spirituality, psychoanalysis, psychology, human sexuality and the history of religion. Here you will learn things that are not talked about on any other YouTube channel. This is because the Knowledge Society scripts are taken directly from books. No chat, no copying and pasting of subjects that are already saturated. I refuse to make videos about fashion trends that everyone is talking about just to get views. My goal is to bring quality content that can really add something to your life. For those who stay until the end of this video, I will give you a bonus. I'm going to indicate a fantastic book, a book that served as the basis for the script of today's story. Shall we start? Although our theme today is the celibacy of priests, and the story of the Pope who was married, it is necessary to make it clear that the association of sex as something impure is not exclusive to Christianity. In ancient Buddhist writings, dating back to approximately 500 years before Christ, marriage is constantly cited as the source of all unrest. The root of this Buddhist teaching comes from Siddhartha himself, the future Buddha, who abandoned his wife and children to walk the path of wisdom. According to Buddhist philosophy, sexual desire, like any other desire, is intrinsically linked to suffering and everything else that prevents us from achieving liberation. As in Buddhism, Christianity's original commandment regarding sex leaves no room for doubt. Adherents must avoid it with all their might. The heavy emphasis today placed on marriage, and therefore on heterosexual sex, can easily lead us to believe that Christianity has always been like this. In other words, the socially entrenched perception of marriage, as sacred, can easily mislead us into thinking that the Church has always viewed marriage this way. I'm sorry to inform you that it was not the case. In examining the origins of Christianity, we realize that heterosexual marriage was just a lifeline, a subterfuge. Marriage was simply an alternative for the faithful, who could not control sexual desire not to fall into temptation, nothing more. The great truth, which few people have the courage to say, is that the image we have of marriage as something desirable, something to be encouraged and safeguarded is a theologically and socially constructed interpretation that goes far from the biblical recommendation. Just look at what the Apostle Paul said in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7. It is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of immorality, each one should have his wife and each woman her own husband. The husband must fulfill his conjugal duties towards his wife, and likewise the wife towards her husband. Do not deny each other, except by mutual consent and for a certain time, to dedicate yourselves to prayer. Then unite again so that Satan will not tempt you. I say this as a concession, not as a command. Note the final part of this text. The apostle was emphatic when he said that marriage would be a concession and not a commandment. Thus, marriage would simply be an escape from the risk of fornication, sexual sin. But Andrew, what does all this have to do with the Pope being married? Don't worry, we're almost there. Let's continue with our reasoning so that we can understand the whole context well, agreed? See well. The idea that Jesus was born of a virgin is in line with the dominant understanding at the time of attaching a label to sex, a negative connotation. After all, how could the child of God be born from a sinful act? We should always respect people's faith. But thinking about it really is curious. The theory that Jesus was born from a virgin served to reinforce the image construction of Christ's purity. A 2007 survey in the US shows that 21% of Protestants and 28% of Catholics do not believe in virgin pregnancy. All sources and research are contained in the book that we will indicate at the end of the video, okay? Well, I believe you will agree with me that sexual energy is one of the most potent and constant forces of the human being. It is something that is in our nature. A most overwhelming impulse and difficult to control. So, as you can imagine, the early days of church organization must not have been easy. Have you ever stopped to think about the mission of the founders of the church? Convince a bunch of people to just stop having sex? As you might already assume, not everyone has managed to adhere to the chastity. The exception of marriage, granted by the Apostle Paul, over time ended up becoming the rule. Over the years and a better administrative organization of the church, a current of thought began to defend that to become a Catholic leader, that is, a priest, a bishop, a cardinal, an apostle, or a pope, should stay away from sexual lust. It is worth remembering that, at that time, there was still no division between the Catholic Church and evangelicals, it was all one thing. Right. One of the first attempts to impose celibacy on priests took place on the initiative of a Spanish bishop, in 325, during the First Council of Nicaea. At that time, the concept of pope was not yet well defined within the Church. Leo I, who lived between the years 440 to 461, is considered, by many, to be the first pope. Only at the First Lateran Council, in 1123, was a final decision reached regarding the celibacy of Catholic priests. In practice, the celibacy decree for priests meant that they were to abstain from marriage, not necessarily from sex. Pay attention to this historical fact, particularly curious. When church hierarchs gathered for the Council of Constance, in 1414, hordes of prostitutes flocked to that citadel, at least 700 of them according to contemporary sources. So, finally answering the big question in today's video, let's reveal the name of the Pope who was married. But the answer may surprise you. Not just one, but several popes maintained a sexually active life throughout the early centuries of the Church. In the 15th century, Innocent VII was the first to publicly recognize his children. Innocent's successor, Pope Alexander XI, ordained his son Caesar a cardinal, and also sponsored an epic Vatican wedding for his daughter Lucrezia. It is always curious to think about the possibility of something that we take for granted, something institutionalized and immutable, like the sanctity of the popes. A few centuries ago it was very different from what it is today. Even though it formally requires celibacy of its priests, the Catholic Church now recognizes that a not inconsiderable number of them are, in fact, married. In addition, several former Anglican and Lutheran pastors who converted were allowed to keep their marriages. So, would religion, in essence, be against any and all types of sex, as more simplistic approaches to the subject tend to suggest? Yes and no. While Christianity and Buddhism, in their origins, emphasize the ideal of total sexual abstinence, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, as well as several other religions, such as some practiced in ancient Greece, suggest the opposite and condemn chastity. It's a lot of information. Whatever the understanding we have regarding the supreme leaders of Catholicism, the fact is that popes are central characters in world geopolitics. They are media figures and their actions and words transcend the religious area, also producing effects in the political and social sphere. Well, as promised, I'll give you a gold nomination. The name of the book, used as the basis for today's video. The book was called Sex and Religion. The author is a Norwegian scholar, Dag Øystein Ensju. If I'm not mistaken, he is an anthropologist. The link to buy this book is in the video description. It's the first link. I think this book is a must-read for anyone who wants to learn a little more about the history of sexuality. It is a book of 500 pages with a very rich content. If you are interested in purchasing the book, buy it through the link, because that way you will be helping the channel. We earn a small commission on sales made through the link. For those who are not interested in the book, no problem. Subscribe here to the channel, and leave a like on the video. You will also be contributing and encouraging me to continue this work. For those who don't read and prefer to watch videos, as a way to absorb knowledge, in addition to subscribing to the channel and activating the notification, I will also recommend a complete course on sexuality. It's the second link in the description. Thank you for accompanying me until the end. And here we end another video from the Knowledge Society.